Welcome to the most northerly doctor in Britain podcast, produced by Michelle Langthorne. That's me. We will dive into insightful diary extracts recorded by Dr. Anne Marshall as she documents her extraordinary time as a sole GP providing routine and emergency care to the 632 inhabitants of Unst, located in Shetland. We listen together and then the reflection and conversation starts. Episode 3. Arrival.
Hi Michelle, I'm just going to pop the little tea cosy on the phone. So this is the first day on Shetland. The ferry got in at 7:30 this morning. It was quite a lumpy crossing, but we had a cabin and very comfortable night and a lovely breakfast on board, and we've headed straight up to get another short ferry to the Isle of Whalsay, which is about a 30-minute drive north of Lerwick, to look at a practice there. And I met the GP who is currently working there, Dr. Andy Hall, who, as it happens, was one of the trainers on my GP training scheme way back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it was really nice to meet him, and him and Christine, the practice manager, have given me the lowdown on working in a small island practice, and it just looks amazing. I'm so excited and enthused about it. Ooh, there goes our ticket blown out the window. Like general practice was 20 years ago when I first started. You know all your patients. It's a very close-knit community, and you see a very reasonable number of patients, and you have time to get to know them and to do your job properly. There's a small dispensary in the surgery, which is good, makes it more interesting, and the team just seem lovely. They get together every morning for a daily huddle at 10:30, and they all stop work, which is very civilised. You get a lunch break. The downside obviously is that you're on call 24/7 while you're working, but it doesn't sound particularly onerous, and you can still have time to go out and go for walks and have some leisure time. So all in all, I am inspired and excited and feeling much happier about starting work next week. I'm wondering whether this is the start of something new. We'll see. We'll see how I find the clinical isolation. I think that's what I'm concerned about, working on your own, not learning from others all the time on a continuous basis, which I find is a really useful, essential part of working as a GP. But they have WhatsApp groups for the locums and the doctors that work on the islands. So, and I think, from what I understand, it's very easy to speak to a consultant at the hospital in Lerwick if you need to. So, all in all, it just seems brilliant, and I haven't felt this excited about work in such a long time.
I'm here with Dr. Marshall. We have just been listening to the third edition of her diary. Now, Dr. Marshall was about to start the shadowing on Unst in Shetland, and she's here with me now. From that diary, I got a real sense of your excitement, and you also seem a lot more, together and calm about what was to come.
Yeah, I think it just really helped just checking in with another practice and another GP who'd got a similar background to me, who'd come from England and was working there and was very happy and settled. And it just really put my mind at rest, knowing that someone like that could get on and do it, I think. And just going through, he talked me through his day and what that was like, and the computer system, and just the sort of day-to-day logistics and ins and outs of it. So it just felt like it wasn't this big scary thing out there in the future, and actually it was something that I could do.
You mentioned briefly some history with Dr. Hall. Do you want to reverse a bit and tell me where you knew him before?
Well, it turned out that, so as a GP, you spend a year on what's called a VTS, a vocational training scheme. So you're a qualified doctor, you've done your junior doctor jobs, and then you spend a year working in a general practice as a GP registrar. And then one day a week, you have a day release course where you go to usually the local hospital. It was either Bath or Swindon, where I was. And you had teaching and training, and you had facilitators, and he was on one of those. So he, towards the end of the year that I was there, he started doing that training for us GPs. So it turned out that he was doing that on the course that I was on, which was quite a coincidence, really.
The other thing you mentioned, Anne, was WhatsApp groups and sort of the way technology was hopefully going to support you and make you feel less isolated. We haven't got there yet. I know you're not sort of in the diary quite there yet. You're still on a ferry, I think, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
I can hear the engines in the background. When you got there, was the WhatsApp groups and that sort of thing as helpful as you thought it would be when you were talking in your diary?
I think it was helpful in that I knew it was there if I needed it. And actually the outgoing GP that I ended up shadowing for 3 days was on WhatsApp, and I was able to contact him as well, which was useful because obviously I'd got a connection with him. So yeah, I'd got that there if I needed it, which was really good.
And how did you use it on a day-to-day basis?
So I didn't use it every day, but I think I mainly used it for things like, so having never worked in Scotland, there are some slight differences with some of their administrative type procedures and roles. So I used it for that.
Any other technology that really helped, since we're on the subject, when you got there that perhaps wouldn't have been there 10, 20 years ago?
That's a good question. I mean, I have to say the clinical computer system was not as up to date as what I'm used to, and I actually found it quite frustrating. But because you had the time, it didn't really matter that much to have all the additional software and things that help me normally in my day-to-day job. Just trying to think. I mean, there was referral pathways were all on the computer, so it was very easy to look up what to do with X, Y, Z. That you know how to refer people. So that was useful. So you could easily find that information quite quickly. But actually, technology wasn't a huge part of it compared to what it is in my day job now in my busy general practice in Dorset.
That's interesting.
I think it was less of a feature in the job.
Why do you think that was?
Because you had more time to spend with patients. You didn't have to rely on the technology to make efficiencies in your day. So it was just a much more of a personable, like general practice used to be 15 years ago.
So you enjoyed that?
I loved that.
Well, the next diary, I think we actually arrived, don't we? And yet you're actually on the island. You've explored the island a bit. You're in your cottage, and we will hear more about that.
So we arrived on Unst 2 days ago, and haven't really recorded anything because it's all been a bit of a blur and a whirlwind and quite overwhelming actually. We drove up from Lerwick, which involved a 2-hour drive and 2 ferry rides to get onto the island of Unst, and we arrived here at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and made our way to our accommodation, which is a small bungalow overlooking Bolter Sound, which is just one of the small villages on Unst. Unst is actually quite a small island, measuring 12 by 5 miles, and the place where we're staying is on a beautiful sort of coastal inlet, which apparently there are otters, but we haven't seen any yet. But my husband's been out and about and has seen a few seals. So it's an amazing place to wake up to, and the bedroom window looks out onto a field with sheep and weirdly a lamb in October who's prancing around in the field, so that's quite lovely to wake up to. And then yesterday really was the last day of freedom before I started work, and the last day really where we were able to explore the island together, because certain areas of the island are going to be out of bounds to me when I'm on call, because the mobile phone signal doesn't reach quite a lot of the areas. So we took the opportunity to head up to the north part of the island called Unst, which is a nature reserve, a protected area of peat bog, which goes over to the cliffs and the northernmost coast of Unst, and looks out to the Muckle Flugga lighthouse. What a great name for a place or a lighthouse, which was apparently manned until 1995, which seems incredible because it's an incredibly wild and inhospitable place to live. And the people that worked on the lighthouse were taken over in an open boat, and if the weather was bad, were winched up to where they would be living. But the day we went over, the visibility was amazing, and although it was a bit windy, it was very beautiful, and the sea was relatively calm. But once you'd walked over the nature reserve to the coastal cliffs and the cliff path, it was just mind-blowingly beautiful, and the most beautiful walk I think me and my husband have both ever done. The cliffs are enormous, they're immense, you can't get the scale of these things, and taking photos just doesn't do it justice. And there were large gannet colonies, and these birds are noisy. Again, you don't get the volume of it from the TV. It was just amazing, and the way they fly and dive and swim, just an amazing feature of nature to behold. And we certainly felt that nature was felt that we were outnumbered by nature. I would say it was a very wild, and you could see how inhospitable it was, or how inhospitable it could be when the weather is bad. But we saw amongst all the gannets lots of cormorants and some. We're not bird watchers, and generally our bird watching skills are little brown birds or little white birds, but we did manage to spot a bonxie, which is otherwise known as a great skewer. And these quite large birds have a habit of dive bombing people if they feel threatened, or if the people are going near their nests. So although we did see a couple of these, they didn't take a disliking to us, so we weren't dive bombed, which was reassuring. But it was just amazing, and I'm so glad that we did it, because obviously it was the last time that really I'd be able to go there. And just to be able to say that we were the most northern couple in the United Kingdom for a couple of hours yesterday was something else.
Now, I love the names they use in Shetland, but there's one I particularly liked in that piece of audio, and that was the lighthouse. Remind us what that was called?
Yeah, so the most northerly lighthouse in the UK is called Muckle Flugga. What a fantastic name for a lighthouse. Yeah.
Does it mean anything? Did you find out what it meant?
No, I didn't look it up or anything. No, but I mean, like a lot of names on Unst, they do have Norse heritage, so I don't know if that's something.
Muckle Flugga. And whereabouts is Muckle Flugga? Remind us.
So it's the very most northerly tip of Unst.
So you did some exploring, and you were there to see the bird life.
That's right. So it's the most northerly nature reserve. So everything on Unst is the most northerly. So the most northerly nature reserve is called Unst, and it's a beautiful, remote, wild nature reserve with lots of bird and wildlife to see. And it's a sort of hike over to the northern corner of Unst, to the huge, immense sea cliffs there to see the bird life.
Birds, nature, is that something you like to do ordinarily in your spare time when you're not sort of practicing?
Yeah, so it's one of the reasons why I chose Shetland, really. I just wanted to go somewhere that had got some very different wildlife that we could go and see and explore, and it was a big pull for us.
I've seen on the TV actually colonies of gannets, and you said the sound was overwhelming and nothing like you would hear when you're looking at a TV nature programme. Just immerse us a little bit more in that.
Yeah, so you go over this little ridge, and then you come across the sea cliffs, and you're the only people there, and there's just what seemed to be hundreds of thousands of these birds that were just making such a cacophony of noise and were dive bombing into the sea, and If you've seen Wild Isles, David Attenborough's programme, I think it's in the very first episode, they've got a picture and a piece of footage of this part of the UK. So it gives you an idea of what it's like, but it was just incredible. And my husband at one point just turned to me and he's just said, "This is quite the most beautiful place I've ever been to." And it really was.
So it had charmed you on the very first few days you were there. You also mentioned that he was lucky enough to see otters. I don't know whether this was off mic or whether it was on your recording now, but you didn't see any of the otters that frequent Unst.
Sadly, I didn't. So when I was out at work, my husband John was off going for walks and exploring, and he saw otters on quite a number of occasions. And I think once he realised what to look for and where to look for them, he was able to see them quite regularly.
Lucky him. Out of everything you saw, what was, in terms of nature, birds or animals, what's the one that stays with you or has stayed with you the most?
Oh, it was most definitely Muckleflugger, the nature reserve, the gannet colony. It was just incredible. The scale of it's like nothing I've ever seen. And
you like gannets, don't you? You were saying.
Yeah.
I know you like puffins too, so seabirds.
Seabirds, definitely a love of mine, yeah.
Okay, well, that's it for today's podcast. We'll be back with you next time. And I think we're actually getting to some medicine then. Yeah, there's quite a dramatic start. This podcast is copyrighted by Michelle Langthorne and all rights are reserved.